Welcome, and thank you for being here. I feel so honored to hold space for this particular talk. As many of you know, I've been doing these conversations with all kinds of experts and policyholders and decision makers and stakeholders around the nation and around the globe about these massive sweeping changes that we're seeing affecting all of our lives. And in the maternity world, one of the biggest shifts is the change in the awareness of what the hospital can or won't do for you, and also the awareness of what's possible in your own environment or in your community. So I got to ask a number of brand new postpartum mamas to come on and talk with us about their choices during the pandemic. And I'm hoping that we can just do little intros and then just have a little conversation because you're all new mamas, you're all juggling your babies, and we know that it's a sensitive topic and a sensitive time in your lives. And so I don't have any particular agenda other than to say, welcome, congratulations. We're so happy for you. And I think there are so many mamas who are struggling with a lot of decision making and a lot of worry at this time, that hearing from other experts who are right in it, who have just navigated the very thing that they're looking at, can be such a gift. So thank you for offering your gift of education and counsel and love to the mamas of the world. And let's just kind of start with introductions, and then we'll kind of head off into whys and hows and all those things. So I'm going to shift to Jane first. And Jane, I'm hoping that you can introduce yourself, your name, where you are in the world, and what inspired you to choose a midwife-attended home birth during the pandemic?
Sure. My name is Jane Yakni-Hopaki, and I live in Southeast Minnesota. And Ingrid's about almost 2 weeks old, and she's my third home birth. So I had one birth in Oklahoma with a traditional birth attendant who'd midwife for about 30 years. And then I had an unassisted home birth in Arkansas, and then I just had her as well. And you asked why I chose a midwife attended.
Like, what's the inspiration behind it? Like,
sure.
People have lots of motivations.
So I'm also a birth worker. I've been studying like traditional out of hospital midwifery for about 5 years now, ever since I fell pregnant with my first babe. And I've been working with a team of midwives for the last year, like serving families. I think we did like 25 births last year. And that's how I met you, was training for at one of your little conferences. And I really oscillated with this birth on whether or not I wanted to have an unassisted home birth or if I wanted to have midwives there. And the midwife that's been my mentor for the last several years, but who I've been working with for the last year, she was very much like, whatever you want to do is fine. If you want me in the room, if you don't want to call me, if you want to call me afterwards, like, just, she was really laid back about everything. And I just feel like I'm so knowledgeable about normal birth that I really hadn't made a decision one way or the other. And I was asked multiple times, and it was just, I just figured that I would kind of decide in the moment. And between COVID-19 and I had some family turmoil as well, I really felt like I needed support in the moment. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Yeah, it does. And I think that's a place some people are. They're thinking, what should I do? And so thank you for telling us. Can you point to any bigger, not this moment, inspirations or influences in your life that led you to choose home birth the first time?
I had a couple of friends that had given birth at home. And the background is I didn't even know that I could have children. I was told that I couldn't have children. And so when I became pregnant with my first, it was very much a surprise. And I really hadn't put a lot of consideration into it, but I did have a couple of friends who'd had home births with midwives. And without that inspiration, I don't know that I ever would have made that choice on my own. So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to Kate now. Kate, will you introduce yourself in the same way? Who are you? Where are you? And what made you choose this?
Hey, well, I'm obviously Kate, and this is little Luna. We are in Brisbane, Australia, and this was actually a planned home birth. We had a really traumatic hospital birth with my first son, and I had vowed that if we were to have another baby, that it would be at home. And yeah, so same with you, Jane. I had a lot of friends that have had home births. So obviously, that was a big inspiration for me. And yeah, I just could not picture myself birthing this baby outside of my own environment with people that, yeah, really supported me. And just, I was honestly terrified of stepping foot in a hospital. I also worked in a hospital. So, yeah, it was just, and of course, my partner was understandably a bit scared. He was like, well, what happens if the same thing happens with Leo? We need to be in a hospital. But I just was so confident from the beginning that that absolutely would not be our story this time. And we had the most delicious, healing, empowering, beautiful outdoor. We were born in the water, complete in every single example of Leo's birth. The complete opposite happened for Luna's birth, and it was just so delicious. That's the word that just keeps coming up for me. Her birth, it was just absolutely so incredible.
That's a beautiful word to describe birth. I really love that. Yeah. So you were terrified of going back to the hospital, and had this really deep well of faith. Tell us, like, where did that faith come from? Where did you get that faith?
Honestly, it's so crazy, especially for someone like me who has had this life of anxiety and like obsessive compulsive thinking and fears, and really always living my life based on like the scary things that are happening. And I just got so over living my life that way that I just decided that I had to completely trust and surrender. And I had a similar-ish kind of life story to you, Jane, where I had 3 miscarriages prior to Leo. And so that with a different partner. So my pregnancy with him was very anxiety driven, and each day was just like Googling things and is this okay, and going to the hospital and getting checks and all things that I requested, and just it was so unnatural. And since the birth of Leo, I took a different, I think that, yeah, you become so grounded, and all of a sudden you're a mother, and your perspective changes with everything. And I became, yeah, a lot more consciously driven, and I just decided I had no other option but to just trust, surrender. They were my affirmations all through pregnancy and labor and birth and life. Now I've decided you have to just completely trust, and that's what I did. I have about 15 friends that have home birth. I haven't yet heard a negative home birth story, and I haven't yet heard a really positive hospital birth story. So I was like, oh.
Yeah, things have changed so much. Thank you for that. I have more questions, but let's circle back in a minute. So thank you so much. And we have Emily on the line. Hi, Emily. I'm so happy to see your face. I mean, the connections in the world are so amazing.
I know, it's
Thank
crazy.
you for being here. Yeah. Thank God for
Thanks
technology
for having me
right now. Yeah.
I know. So I'm Emily. This is my 3rd boy, my 2nd home birth. My first was also a traumatic hospital birth. We didn't have the resources that we do now to have home births then, unless you did it unassisted, of course, which was not in the cards for me at 19 years old. My 2nd home birth was long and really difficult. With this one, I actually went back and forth whether I was going to do a home birth or a hospital birth. We just bought a home last summer, and it doesn't quite feel like home yet. You know how you got to like get your walls painted and you have to make it your place. It didn't quite feel like my place yet. And my insurance doesn't cover home birth. So I would have had to pay out of pocket my midwife. So I kind of went back and forth. I did my own prenatal appointments. I took care of myself. I weighed myself. I had my labs done with the midwife here. I just paid her out of pocket for those. And then when all of this COVID stuff started happening, it was like my sister had a baby, and she had massive bleeding. She didn't have to go to the hospital. She had the baby at the birth center with the midwife. I don't have access to those drugs. So I had everything. I bought a birth kit. I had the tub. I had everything I needed. But I didn't have the drugs. And that was my biggest thing, was I was fully prepared to do it unassisted. But this stuff, stuff can happen. And I didn't trust myself enough to be able to take care of those emergencies if they happened. So that was my biggest thing, with having a home birth. And the confirmation was when, the COVID stuff started getting really bad. It was like, there was no way I was going to the hospital.
Yeah. Well, what a range you had of thinking hospital birth, home birth with a midwife, unassisted birth. Like you had, you were open to all possibilities.
I was, yeah.
But actually safety and having someone else who could help you in your own environment is what kind of tipped the scale for you.
Yeah. And I actually told her that with my midwife, I told her I didn't need her here till after he was born, because even for midwives, she had to wear a mask, which makes it's not as intimate when your midwife is wearing her mask, and it's like, she had to take her precautions and she had to protect herself. So it was like, I couldn't have my whole family here like I wanted, which was fine.
Yeah.
They were over video. It's okay. It made the experience for me a little less stressful, I think, not having so many people here. But yeah, it was different. And, it made me kind of sad for midwives. But it'll be over soon. So I did deliver the baby's head on my own. It got to that point. She came and she said, I knew you were going to try and deliver this baby on your own.
Oh, midwives. We have a bit of a sixth sense sometimes. Well, so, we're going to talk about your birth stories kind of in a little more depth, but, and certainly only to the level that you feel comfortable. But I would like to kind of stay in our big picture awareness for a second and kind of zoom to the other side right now. All of you are literally just a few days out from your birth. I think 2 or 3 weeks at most. Kate, how old is your baby? Oop, you're muted again. No.
Now?
Yeah, now it's, I don't know why it kind of turns off for you.
Oh, no, 4 weeks.
4 weeks. Okay. And Jane, you said,
almost 2.
Almost 2. And Emily,
2 weeks tomorrow.
2 weeks tomorrow. Yeah. So, I mean, my gosh, this is still the very early postpartum. And I guess what I'd really love to hear from you is from this tender, vulnerable, early postpartum place where you're still at home, you're still literally recovering, you're still bleeding from your birth. I mean, we're in this very, very tender place. Can you advise the other mamas in the world who might be sitting and grappling with this decision? What helped you? What do you wish you'd known? What do they need to know? Any of you?
That home birth can be safe. To trust your body, to trust your instincts. I had a really good experience. Both my home births were also really delicious. This one was even more so delicious than my last one. But you just have to follow your instincts. There was times where I thought maybe I do need to go to the hospital. Maybe there's a reason why I'm being pulled in this direction. But then when I got to about 36 weeks, I was like, I can't do it. You have no support in the hospital. You can't take anybody in there with you.
I think some hospitals are adding one person as a support person in the US.
I think that we're allowed one person. which is fine, you know, but it's so stressful. Like, I don't know if you guys have even been to the grocery store. Even going out anywhere is like, it's so eerie and stressful, and the energy is just not like it is at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing what it's like in different parts of the world, because I think Australia is a little bit more chilled. I don't know. We're definitely like taking it seriously and whatnot, but I've been staying away from listening to too much of this, or we don't watch the news in our home. And I think it's important to remember that we are pre-programmed for birth. Our bodies know how to birth. We need to just, as you said, and trust in our babies, trust in our bodies, and really subscribe to and read and listen to the beautiful stuff, and try and like stay away from the madness a bit, because I find as soon as I go on Facebook or anything like that, it's all over for me. I'm becoming anxious and scared, and I think we're just putting that into our bodies. And I think it's such an important time now to surround yourself with, obviously we can't physically, but be in touch with people that really help support all of those good feelings for us. And just remember that we can do this, and that it's a beautiful time. I think the sad thing is, as you were saying, Emily, if you can't have your family and whatnot, and we got to look for the beauty in this weird moment. You know, it's forced time at home with family members that may not usually be here, partners, husbands, whatever, that are working lots. And I know that there's other stressful factors that come into, where they're not working now, but really taking advantage of this time and having that extra support that we may not. I mean, my partner would have been back at work 2 weeks ago, and that would have been pretty stressful for me. So having had that extra support to heal and just sleep in and have more bonding time with, Luna, and extra time with Leo, I've just had to focus completely on the positives. And I think that's all we can really do.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Jane, as a birth worker, do you have advice
for me personally? As a birth worker, I feel like I'm in such a funny place right now between like just stepping out of birth work and like stepping into being a mother to this baby. I mean, I guess just to answer your original question, I think being on essentially house arrest when you're freshly postpartum is probably the easiest time to be doing that. And I just always feel so protective of my postpartum space. And there's no visitors, no one's bothering me. I think that's been a really nice thing about this. Also, my partner manages a health food store, so he's an essential worker, and his company gave him some extra paid leave before the baby was born, just because they knew that we were concerned about health and safety at that time. I'm less concerned now than I was towards at like 38, 39 weeks, when I was, I feel like everything is a little bit more raw when you're very close to having a baby and then the world explodes. So that's been really nice to have some extra paid time as a family. We've just been snuggled up and spending time outdoors as we can. So I really don't think that for the postpartum period, it's changed much. But the end of my pregnancy, the last 2 or 3 weeks of my pregnancy were really stressful for me. Just with so many things up in the air, just so many unknowns. And birth is inherently an experience where you go into the unknown. But and maybe that's part of where being a birth worker, where it got more stressful for me, because I was trying to look at the situation through 2 different lenses. How I would want to be serving families and like protecting myself as a birth worker, and like knowing that midwives are going to be coming into my home in scrubs and gloves and masks, because that's not the way that we normally do things. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I just think back to yourself 4 and 5 and 6 weeks ago, in the midst of this decision making, in the midst of this chaos and worry. Emily, you can mute your line if you need to while you're settling him, but you're so good at it. Look at him. He's already happy. I just wonder, like, if you could have had you give yourself the advice that you needed to hear, what would it have been? Like Emily said, just know that home birth can be safe and you can trust yourself. Jane, what would you say?
I would just say that staying home is my experience has been, okay, so I live in Rochester, Minnesota, which is the home of Mayo Clinic, which is doing all of this amazing work. Yeah, so I live in a very, they call it Med City. So for me personally, the choices that I've been making, I've essentially made very similar choices with all three of my births, but they seem much more normal to the larger public right now than they ever have before. And people are like, that's awesome. That just sounds like a great idea. I think it's so easy to stay home. And going into a birth center or a hospital was never a choice that I would have made with this birth. But even though I didn't know if I wanted midwives at my birth or not until I really got down to laboring, staying home was just a really, I guess, easy choice to make. And I feel like if you're afraid that hospitals are not safe and you're afraid that because of COVID or just in general that hospitals are not a great place to have a normal birth, it just goes along with that logic that home is probably even more the safest place to have a normal birth right now.
Yeah, I do feel like that's a pretty universal takeaway that's happening right now. Hospital is for sick people.
Yeah. And
if you're normal, we stay home. I think that's the governmental, stay home. That's the news, right? So applied to pregnant people, it also actually makes a lot of sense, like you said, on a big mainstream way, like it hasn't in a long time. Yeah. Little squirrely one down there. So I have a question about being in the moment of birth, because there might be a lot of pregnant people out there who think, okay, I get it. Home birth is for normal people. I'm ostensibly normal. Okay, I definitely don't want to be separated from my family. I don't want my baby to be separated from me. I don't like the idea of the technological craziness right now. Okay, I'm for home birth, but you can't have an epidural at home. How do I do this? Right? So for people pre-pandemic who were not considering home birth, and now many, many have. I've been doing interviews with midwives around the country, around the globe. So many calls. There's a midwife in Tennessee who's getting 30 calls a day. There's midwives in New York City who can't get to all their calls.
Yeah.
It's not possible for them to live their life and provide the care to their current clients and answer all the calls.
I've heard that in New York, they're telling, midwives are really suggesting that people don't consider home birth because they're so overrun that they can't handle it. Yeah.
They can't. I talked to a midwife in Florida, similar. She's a single stay-at-home, she's a single working mother with only enough childcare and support to do 2 or 3 births a month. She can't be gone from her home while her children are home she can't take more clients. I think if nothing else, this pandemic is pointing to how on the edge and broken many of our systems were, including and especially community-based birth, because midwives have been marginalized for 100 years in the United States. That we can't scale up like what's asking. Now, there are many midwives who are. That midwife in Kentucky is taking all the low-risk people, including, she did 10 births in 14 days, including 2 moms who she'd never met, only Zoom called with, showed up at their house to do their birth. And they've all gone normally, and she's an incredible midwife, and she has the skill to do that, and, God bless her. But we can't scale up the way that I think suddenly the consciousness of the moms realizes. So for those that do get in with the midwife, we had this interview with a bunch of midwives who are talking about opening emergency birth centers so that there is a place that's for normal birthing people in communities. Now, again, that's a massive effort and it's not going to happen as fast as I think people want it to. But one of the best advices one of the midwives on that call said was, don't wait. If you think you want a different way of care, if you think you want a home birth with a midwife, go now, schedule now. Don't wait until you don't have the ability in the hospitals, right? Now we're seeing numbers change, and it looks like the vast majority of the country is not going to see overwhelming numbers like New York is seeing, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think this is good advice. If you think you might want to do this, do it. And so back to that question, if those mamas are like, theoretically, intellectually, I can see how this makes a lot of sense. But how do you actually get through a normal natural labor? Because many had never considered doing that. So I wonder if you could go back a couple weeks to when you were in it. And between the three of you, you've had 6 home births. How do you get through normal labor?
I did a lot of reading, actually. Rhea Dempsey's book, Birth with Confidence, helped me a lot with just
Will you say the title again? Say the title again.
Birth with Confidence. Great book.
Okay.
Rhea Dempsey. And
can you show it again? Talk a little louder so the screen pops to you. And then.
Oh, can you hear me now?
The auto thing is not popping to you because somehow you're not quite loud enough.
Okay, am I loud now? No? I don't know what's happening. No, I don't know why it's not coming here.
Yeah, I don't know either. Tap your microphone on your, do you have on your computer? Are you on your computer?
I don't know why it's doing this.
I don't know either. It's Zoom might be just literally so overwhelmed with the 80 billion people on it right now.
Oh, I don't know why it's doing this.
Yeah, it just doesn't zoom to you because I think you're just not quite as loud. Maybe if the rest of us mute for a minute, it will go to her.
Or she could just try bringing the computer closer. That might help too.
Now? Oh, there. It's working now? Cool. I don't know how much you heard of that, but basically this book, Birth with Confidence, Rhea goes through all just basically how the female body works in labor. And I had such an appreciation, and I was so in awe of each hormonal response and basically what your body does. And I think for me personally, having such a firm understanding of what your body does in that, I actually almost appreciated the whole process. Whereas with Leo, I was just terrified. Every contraction that I had, I just wouldn't breathe. I would, as soon as there was a break, I would just be stressing, thinking about the next one, and wouldn't do any relaxing or breath work. For me, just breathing was so, I mean, I didn't do any hypnobirthing or anything, but literally just, I don't think that any of us understand how amazing your breath can be in any situation. And literally when you feel it and visualizing, for me, the visualization of everything and just breathing, obviously it was still so freaking intense, but I had this deep appreciation for it. And of course, when you're in your own home and you've got like candles, your things, like your comfort, I mean, I every day wake up and I'm like, I just want to do that again. And as I say, I had a really traumatic first birth experience with my son. So yeah, I think that when you're in your own setting and you've got a really cool understanding of how your body is working during this time, it is amazing. And then to be able to experience that fully and then know that you're going to have this love bomb afterwards and everyone's going to be high on oxytocin. I mean, we were all high for like a while. I still am. So
yeah, people who don't understand the hormonal cascade of normal birth, they think that they have to go into a wall of pain that with no help. And I think what you're sharing is so important. It's actually nature does not leave you bereft in the moment of your work. It actually gives you some of the most powerful endorphins and catecholamines and norepinephrine and all these incredible hormones that make it copable.
Yeah. So I learned about all of that, and I ended up, I was excited. I was excited to feel my body do something that it's pre-programmed to do. My cells are pre-programmed for this, and it's exciting. You feel everything moving, and you can, or pain is power. I just kept repeating that to myself. And you think about how, you know, where birth has become so medicalized, where it's like, you know, you need a team of people to help you when you're in birth, because you're in pain. And I mean, it's almost like you become this patient in like ICU, where you're hooked up to all these things to keep your body doing something that's a normal physiological, you know, process. And I think that if you recognize that, you know, if you think about athletes who at the end of like a marathon, they are like, their body is in a state of like, you know, panic, and they are not feeling good. And that is just your body in it's a normal physiological process. That's your body in, I can't think of the word right now, but yeah, birth is the same. It's you're in a different kind of marathon. And how is it any different to someone in an extreme sporting event? Your body's just operating the same, basically.
Yeah, it's there's nothing really quite that we can relate to, which is why I think it's gotten so disorganized in thinking, and why it's gotten so far away from the normal physiologic process in our culture. Is there's nothing quite like it. I mean, I have tried for years as a midwife and childbirth educator and you know, investigator, instructor, to come up with a word, an English word that describes the process. There isn't one. I've looked for 20 years. It's painful, but not like any pain you've ever felt. It's overwhelming, but that's like a baby word. It's intense, but intense on a level that you don't have words for. The only English word that I've ever gotten close to describing the sensation of being in a normal natural labor is crazy. It's crazy. It's so much that it's crazy, and yet it works so well that it's crazy. And you want off the labor train so bad, but you also wouldn't dare, because it's crazy. Like, there's no way to describe it. I wonder, as we go to Jane to answer this question of like, what's it like and how do you get through it? Do you have any opinions about that?
Sure. Well, I guess I would say my first birth was like a nightmare. I was probably like mentally underprepared as a first-time mom. It was like 6 hours, which was faster than I thought it was going to go. And I just screamed my baby out. And that was, despite being like really normal, that was honestly a little bit traumatic for me. And my next birth was way longer, almost a full 24 hours, but totally euphoric. Never got more painful than it started. So just like kind of those little like crampy twinges. I mean, like the sensation changed, you know, as my baby was like descending down the birth canal. And then my water broke, and then you have like the kind of ring of fire type sensation. But I swear it just never got to be more painful than it ever started. And I think that was really my mindset there. I did a lot of like meditation, and I had done just a whole lot of mental preparation to have a baby at home with my partner by myself. And so, yeah, I mean, after that birth, for the years after that birth, I just said, I would birth 1,000 babies. I just can't care for that many. Like, I would do that so many times. Even though after my baby was born, I did actually get kind of like fainty and feel a little bit yucky, and not that I was hemorrhaging or anything, but just was really exhausted from a long labor after that. But the labor itself was great. And then for this birth, I think just again, like with all of the craziness from COVID-19, my father also died a couple of days before my baby was born. The midwife that I've been working with the last year got stuck at a birth center in northern Uganda, where she was volunteering because they were severely understaffed due to malaria, and couldn't attend my birth. So the midwife that I had at my birth, I'd worked with her a couple of times, but I hadn't been to a birth with her and didn't really know her that well, or honestly how she practiced. And so they were at the tail end of my pregnancy. I was like, okay, what do I want here? What am I going to do? And I just think all of that craziness really wrecked my mindset going into this labor. And so my big 2 cents for birthing during COVID-19 is that even though it wasn't my funnest labor, it was kind of, I was a mess. I cried when the midwife got there, and I cried when my friend got there to watch my children, and thought I couldn't do it. And it was nothing compared to my second labor, which again, what I thought was like kind of euphoric for the most part. And yet birth still works. Women give birth in unfavorable situations all over the world all the time. And I got through it. And as soon as my baby was born, I mean, like, it's just been totally euphoric after that. I mean, I feel like I've been wrapped up in this little loving bubble ever since then, despite the world still kind of being on fire and not knowing. I'm a birth worker, so I have women calling me in my community asking for help or advice. I mean, despite all of this, and my heart, you know, I have friends that are birthing right now that are not knowing what they're going to get. And despite all of that, I just feel like it's been really euphoric, and just knowing that my body can do things even if I don't think that they're possible. That's one thing that I want to let moms know that are thinking about home birth for the first time is we all do our best to prepare, and it doesn't always go the way that you planned, but birth still works. So
I love that. And you brought up another really important point that I also see a lot as a midwife and as a counselor and educator. Birth trauma is almost always a result of unmet expectations, not what was done or not done to you. And that we are at a huge risk for that happening right now. For women, no matter what their plans were before, expectations are not matching reality. And that is trauma. And I'm grateful that you are so clearly describing that. I'm sorry you went through that. I also want to validate that as being entirely normal right now.
Right,
as
a reasonable
abnormal
response to a really crappy situation. Yeah,
totally. And there are going to be many others. And so your takeaway message that birth works, even when your brain doesn't want it to, your body still gets your baby out almost all the time. I totally agree. And then calling that friend in and calling that midwife in who you didn't know because you felt like you needed support is one of the best recommendations that there is. I mean, I think especially those of us who tend to be fairly strong, independent, can-do kind of people, it's hard to ask for help. It's hard to be vulnerable. And birth makes us be more vulnerable than almost any human activity. And now, like you said, with the world on fire, there's nothing quite so vulnerable. So that's why I love that advice to switch now, find those people now, find your support. That's why I love home birth, because you can actually call those people in. You can be in a soft nest of your own making. And I'm so grateful for you sharing that. Thank you. Yeah. Emily, can we go to you and go back to that question? Like, how do you do this? How do you get through a normal labor and birth if you hadn't really planned to do that?
Well, I guess you just do it. You just have to trust your body. You have to trust that you're, like as a woman, you're made to do this. You have to trust that if there is a problem, you still have options. If something happens, you still have the option to go to the hospital. You still have the option to call in more support, whether it be another midwife or a friend or a family member or the ambulance. You still have options, and just because you choose home birth doesn't mean that you're stuck. Like if something goes wrong, doesn't mean that you're stuck here having to deal with the problem by yourself.
I love that. Thank you so much for that piece of wisdom. That rings true for me completely. Choosing home birth doesn't mean you're stuck there. And actually the converse might be true. Choosing a hospital birth does mean you're stuck there. So actually this is a great way to have options. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that was something with me. It was like, if I chose to go to the hospital, you have to stay there for a certain amount of time, at least one night. I don't want to crawl in those uncomfortable beds when my bottom hurts and I'm bleeding all over. I want to be in my bed with my pillows and with my baby and my husband and all my other kids. It's just it's so much more peaceful when you're at home and easy. And I think that a lot of interventions at the hospital happen because of the stress level. You're in an environment with a bunch of strangers that are poking and prodding you, and you're strapped to all these monitors, and you can't move out of your room, and you can't eat or drink. You get ice chips. And when you're at home, you get to have all your favorite foods, and you get to have your drinks and the ice from your fridge. And, it's just like, for everybody, it's just comfortable. And when you're comfortable, it's easier, I think.
Yeah, that's very good advice. And I love that. It's easier, it's more comfortable, it's more familiar, and you can also always change your mind.
Yes.
I think that's a brilliant takeaway for moms who might be planning this. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Of course.
Yeah. So, let's get to the very nitty gritty. Are you guys willing to? With me? So far you've been about as honest and vulnerable and open as I could possibly imagine. So I'm going to go there. When you're white knuckling it through a contraction, how do you do it? What do you think? How do you move? What do you need? Like in transition, when your brain is telling you you're dying, how do you keep the perspective to know that you're not?
For me, I did a lot of visual, like I'm thinking in my head, like, pardon my French, oh, fuck, this hurts. Like, how am I going to do this longer and longer? And with this birth, it went so fast. And I didn't expect it to go that fast. So when I was in transition, which I didn't even realize because I was still like texting and talking to my family, I would think to myself, like, oh my God, I'm going to have to do this, for how many more hours? This hurts so bad. But then I would be like, okay, but I'm opening, like this is what's happening is I'm opening and I have to surrender. And visual stuff worked for me a lot, like imagining breathing in that white light and pushing it down, that's how I got through it. And just like, oh my God, I get to meet my baby soon. I can't wait to see my baby.
That's beautiful.
I felt safe the whole time. I felt really safe with my beautiful midwives that I built this relationship with, that were there to support me in whatever capacity I needed, whether it was outside or right there or speaking or not speaking or whatever. Obviously I had my partner, my 2.5-year-old son was there, I had my sister-in-law, and my best friend was filming it. And so I felt really safe with everyone that was there. And again, same as you, Emily, visualization, and then also just remembering to render and work with that pain, and just reminding myself that this was my body just in peak performance, and that it's okay, that there's pain and then there's pain, that this wasn't like dying pain, this was like pain that was helping me meet my baby quickly. And to be honest, I felt a real beauty with the pain. It was weird, like, I can't even actually describe it. I just went somewhere. I mean, I was in my labor start to finish, labor and birth and everything was 5 hours, which was stark contrast to my birth of my son. And I just surrendered fully. I was just in the pool and I was just floating. I released all tension in my body. Luke, my partner, kept saying, like, just release like your muscles. And I think that I'm probably going so off track because I'm like getting lost in it now, but yeah.
No, this is exactly the advice we wanted. Keep going.
Yes, just really, I remember, and when I watched the video, our birth video, which is so delicious, I'm like, was that me? And where was I? But I was somewhere. I think if you just release that resistance. We have so many resistances to so many things in life. This is the perfect time to just like release that resistance and I let go of everything. I was truly just floating. I was gone. I was gone somewhere. And then
we call that labor land.
Oh,
yeah.
breathing slow. I never actually made a sound. Interestingly, like I have a lot of friends that are very like loud and primal birthers, but I didn't make a sound. I just breathed quite loudly, and I think that that powerful when it's so loud that you actually just are distracting yourself from everything with how loud your breath is, and then it's over, and then you just relax and you breathe through that, and I was just excited the whole time. I don't know. I really loved it. Which is, I
beautiful.
love that because it's so different to the first experience that I had, which I didn't think that I'd have another baby because I was like scared, but yeah.
Wow. Well, is it okay that we share that you have made this birth public?
Yes.
Okay. Kate had a videographer, a photographer at her birth and compiled a really beautiful birth video that we'll put in the link of this video if that's okay with you.
Oh, of course. It was actually just my bestie, my best friend. I just gave her my camera and I said to her, she had a home birth, and so she actually inspired me to birth at home as well. And I said, just do your thing, like no expectations. I had truly manifestation is so real, and I have so many examples.
Oh, Kate, we lost you again. Kate, somehow.
Now?
Yeah, gotcha.
I don't know what you did here, but I feel like the second I found out I was pregnant, I just was manifesting this birth and this outcome, and I didn't know what we were having, but from the beginning, I just felt this little presence of a little girl, and I just knew Luna was coming, and it was going to be beautiful. Have you guys lost me again?
We can hear you, but the screen has gone off again. I don't know. It's so weird on your end.
Strange. Australians, eh?
No, I don't think that's it.
No, so yeah, it was just a beautiful, really raw video that I just, I've been learning a little program of putting videos together, and I just put it together with some of my birth playlist, and I really want it to be shared everywhere so that people can see how beautiful and normal home births can be, because I had a lot of people trying to be like, well, and now they all want to do it themselves.
Yeah.
that's really beautiful. Jane, how do you get through the white-knuckle place where you're like, I can't do this?
Sure. I think for me, breathwork is probably the most important tool in my toolbox. The more oxygen you have flowing, the less pain hurts. So I'm a pretty quiet birther as well. And I think that's just because I found that when I vocalize, I actually end up with less oxygen. And at that point, it just hurts worse. So just really using breath work, and then movement has been really important to me throughout my labors. This last one, I was really interested in exploring standing, because I had all three of my babies now in kind of like a kneeling squat. And I really enjoyed standing, especially during like second stage. So when my baby was actually descending, that felt the best to me. So that was another tool in my toolbox. My legs ended up just getting really tired towards the very end of it. And I did end up getting into a pool for about 10 minutes and birthing my baby there in the same position that the other two have been born in. But yeah, being upright was really surprisingly helpful for me this time. And I think too, just birth affirmations and like, again, working with your mindset. So I was just trying to tell myself like to take each contraction like one at a time. We're just going to focus on this one. I'm not going to sit here and worry about how painful the last dozen have been or how many more there's going to be. Just going to do one at a time. And then one of the things that I really appreciated about my labors too is that they're not we teach women that contractions are supposed to be really regular when you're having your baby, and they are for the most part, but it's not like textbook, like 5 minutes or 2 or 3 minutes between every contraction. And so just appreciating the reprieves that you get, I think, is really important too. Or you might have a contraction that feels like a double peak, and then one that's not nearly as strong and goes a lot quicker, and it's like, whew, well, that was great. I'm going to enjoy that for what it is. I'm going to take this rest that I have and then be ready for the next one whenever it strikes. I think that's really important too, just to keep yourself present instead of lingering on like how painful or how long or how much longer it's going to be. Those are some tools that I've used.
Beautiful. I love that. I just love that. You all have such wisdom, and the thing what I keep hearing over and over, which is I think what I would like to communicate to birthing moms as on the outside as a midwife is the mindset. Getting through a contraction is really getting through an hour, which is really getting through the whole labor, which is really getting through everything that comes at you, no matter what the outcome. The process of embracing what is happening, knowing what is happening, surrendering to what is happening, influencing it as best you can, and always like letting it down at the river, that mindset of that it's so hard to teach, I think. I mean, you have to discover it. It is yours. Nobody can give you the right mindset. Only you can really embody that. But over the years of helping people have babies, it's essentially these couple of things. Whatever you've chosen, let it be a choice of what you're walking towards, not what you're walking against or away from. So if only choose a home birth because you want a home birth, not because you don't want a hospital birth. That makes all the difference. Fear-based decisions don't help in any area of life. They certainly don't help in birth. And the antidote to fear is honestly education. So if you're really, really afraid, you need more faith. So to grow your faith, you have to know what is options, what it feels like, who you can call, how to get through the process. So education is the antidote, I think, to fear. So if you're still in a fear process, you need probably to have more resources, more books, more videos, more people like this to talk to ask questions. The second thing I would say is that there is no right way to have a baby. This conversation that we're having with these three experts are experts of their own bodies and their own process. That nobody can tell you the right way to do it. If you feel called in a specific direction, keep researching until it feels right to you. But don't ever, ever take any kind of shaming, blaming, shoulda, woulda, coulda language about how you're supposed to have a baby. There are people right now that, given the research and the exploration and their own personal inquiry, have decided to have scheduled cesareans. That's okay. There are people that have decided to have babies by themselves. That's okay. The only, I think the only real important piece in the decision-making process to have where and how and with whom you have a baby at this stage and this point in history is what makes you feel safer and more relaxed. That's it. Whatever that is, that's what you pursue. And if you feel safer and more relaxed laying on an operating table, inviting experts to help your baby be born, that's a very valid choice. And if you feel safer in a tub of water in your backyard, that's a very valid choice. And anything in between. And I think that that freedom to make a choice that's really right for you is what has been missing in all of our cultures in the last bunch of years. And so I just really want to reaffirm that this conversation is for those folks that might feel like this is the right choice, but this in no way vilifies any other choice. So that's the other piece of information. And then lastly, what I would say, which many of you have already said, so just echoing a universal truth here, is that even when you think you can't get through it, you generally can. And because birth is not just a physical experience, it's a mental, emotional, spiritual, familial, generational experience. All the other hard things you've done in your life are what prepare you for it. And the same way that you got through that, you got through a breakup, a divorce, a family loss, a move, a chaos in any other part of your life, you get through this too, in ways that you never knew were possible. So when you're white knuckling it through a contraction and you're thinking, I can't, some part of you will remember that you really can. And like Jane said, even if you never can remember that, your baby generally still comes out. And then the epiphany can be afterwards. I can do it. Look at that. Yeah, I'm so grateful to chat with you all, and so grateful to be able to hold space for the mamas of the world, the pregnant people of the world who are wondering and worried and searching how and where and whom and how and what, and all the crazy questions that you all navigated just a few weeks ago. Anyone have anything they want to wrap up with? Anything that they want to leave us on? Little piece of wisdom. Your sweet little babies are all falling asleep because your excellent mothering skills worked perfectly. I love that.
I really loved what you said. Hopefully, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
I loved how you said, that however you choose to birth, with whatever feels right and safe and comforting for you is okay. Because, I have friends that have had cesarean scheduled, unplanned, hospital, whatever. And at the end of the day, we all know what was so important to us to make our decisions in birthing, that we feel safe and, comfortable and at home. And yeah, that isn't the same choice for most people, but it is lovely for us to be examples of home births that, are usually so beautiful. And with my first birth, it being a hospital birth, the thought of birthing at home, I was like, no way, that's irresponsible. I need people there to help me. And I'm so glad that I was able to shift my perspective and, experience this myself. And I think that a lot more women will, if we continue to share these stories, that, you can do this and it's beautiful, and give it a go. If you feel confident enough to do it, why not? But congratulations to you as well.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for doing this. It's just helping to empower women and inspire them. And yeah, especially during this weird time. It's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank to each of you. I'm so happy to see your beautiful faces.
Thank you for reaching out to me. I really appreciate being a part of this because, like Kate said, being a part of a movement to empower other women is huge for me. Even if nobody listens, somebody will listen at some point, someone is hearing us, and hopefully someone is taking into consideration what we're saying. And safety is huge, and wherever you feel safe and wherever you feel like you can trust yourself, that's the important thing. In the end, you get your baby, and look at this. There's nothing better. Nothing better.
Thank you for that.
I just think this conversation is so important because I'm really envisioning this whole COVID-19 situation changing the landscape of midwifery care around the world, but hopefully, especially in the United States, where women just don't even realize that they have these kinds of options. And so I'm just so hopeful that more women realize the choices that they have, And I think that there's just something really beautiful about how like chaos and like all of the stress of any kind of like life situation, but especially when it affects the whole globe, really brings into perspective like what's most important for people personally. And I'm just really happy with the decision that I made to go ahead and invite people into my birth space. And yeah, I'm definitely part of the pandemic was part of that whole a piece in that puzzle. So I'm really hopeful that there's going to be some good things coming out of this for women and for babies.
Me too. So mote it be. Let that be the takeaway for sure. Well, just thank you again to each of you. I know that none of you have ever met each other, and you know, I've only met a couple of you, and Emily, I haven't seen you in, I don't know, 10 years or something. And I'm so grateful that you were willing to come and be so vulnerable and open and share your hearts and your pathways with us and your babies. Do you want to end on introducing your little people and we can see them for the world? Emily, go ahead.
This is Rocco Cruz.
Rocco. Oh, it's so cute.
He's a pocket size of my husband. He looks just like him.
Oh, pocket-sized husband. That's the best. Yeah. Thank you. Who do you have there, Kate?
This is Luna Jewel. Yeah, this is Luna Jewel. My little moonstone.
And how many weeks?
She'll be a month tomorrow.
Wow.
Yeah, it flies.
And there's a sleeping baby with Jane.
Yeah, this is Ingrid. And yep, she's about 2 weeks old, almost 2 weeks old. So just soaking it in because I'm pretty sure this is the last baby. So all the snuggles and kisses.
Beautiful.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you to each of you. Blessings on your beautiful babies. And thank you for sharing with the world. Okay. Bye, friends.